fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. David Martino is here.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm crawled up from the basement of the House of Mystery.
Yeah. We're doing an all-day recording marathon, just like last
That's
week.
right.
It never ends in the House of Mystery. It just keeps going on and on and on.
But we like it like that. It's fun.
Yeah. We've got our favorite horror author with us today, and he's got a new series out. Book one of that series is out, and the book one is called Scream in the Dark, and it's the Ojanox series, and Daemon Manx. Thank you for being here.
Al, David, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you caught me. I was going to call you Matt Damon again. But,
That's okay.
You remind me of him so much.
Boyish good looks.
Your boyish good looks, charm, ability to carry a role out and act and all that. Are you gonna be an actor eventually? Are you gonna get into acting?
I don't know if you've seen my most recent video. I think I'm already a bit of an actor.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm submitting it to the Oscars, and, for director cut, and I hope that you get nominated for Best Actor.
I'm told it's probably the most disturbing thing on the internet at the moment, but also brilliant in its own right.
Well, usually brilliant things are disturbing, and that's why they're brilliant, right?
We do try to be provocative, and I think that's the bottom line.
So let's talk about this new series you've got out. What's the basic premise of the series and over the 4 books? What is it that you're telling us about?
The Ojanox series by Daemon Manx takes place in an isolated mountain town the week before Halloween. It's 1979. There are no cell phones. There is no internet. Troy Fischer prepares to have what he thinks will be the greatest Halloween party of his entire 10-year existence on this earth. But a few of the children are unable to attend the party because they've come down with the flu. Well, that night we find out that their flu is far worse than anything than a case of the sniffles. And as contagion begins to spread in the town of Garrett Grove and the bodies start to appear, let's just say appear, it's very quickly learned by the town's sheriff, doctors, medical examiner that there is something drastically wrong in the town of Garrett Grove. Ancient evil, Halloween, biological horror with a sprinkling of coming of age, all encapsulated in what I wanted to make a novel, a series like the early 80s, late 70s horror novels that I loved so much growing.
Wow, I didn't know you were that old. But so
I am old. I'm actually older, probably older than you even think I am.
Well, I thought you were like 29, maybe.
Yeah, no, I am 31.
Oh, there you go. See, I'm close. Yeah.
And I'm completely lying.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. People don't need to know. So that's interesting. What is good 80s horror for you?
Ooh, well, I grew up reading Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Clive Barker, and I do also love Richard Lehman, which is a little bit of a turn towards the other side of it. But, for me, I read Stephen King at far too young of an age. I was reading The Shining, and I was reading The Stand, and Salem's Lot, and Cujo, and all those, and then Watchers, and by Dean Koontz, and Strangers, and Lightning, Books of Blood, all that stuff. That, for me, those paperbacks from those early 80s, late 70s, just the way the stories were told back then, and the way those books unfolded.
Wow. No Brady Bunch?
It has a feel. Hardy Boys for sure.
Well, we heavily influenced by, let's say, the splatterpunk movement of extreme horror, or the quiet, more mainstream horror, where you kind of turn away from from the splattery bits.
Yeah, so I was less influenced by splatterpunk. I was more influenced by the traditional quiet horror. And I've tried to make this book a lot of that show, don't tell, build up the tension. But there's, when it comes to delivering the impact, the gore, the blood, I do when necessary. Some of the books get a little messy, that's for sure. But I don't rely on the descriptive splatter to send the message. I feel I can get the reader in other ways.
Right.
Right. Suspense is just as important.
Yeah, rising tension for sure. I definitely like to set the mood, and I like to give a bit of a description about our settings and the emotions that our characters are feeling.
I love rising emotion. So when we talk about your main character now, you got Troy Fischer. Who is Troy Fischer, and how did he come to you, or where does he come from?
Troy Fischer is a 10-year-old boy who in love with Halloween. He's in love with autumn. He is building a haunted house in his garage, and he has his friends over for a Halloween party, and his mom is reading ghost stories and making cupcakes for him. And Troy is just infatuated with this time of year. He is a page right out of my own childhood. When I was a young lad myself, I built a haunted house in my garage in 4th grade, had my mom host the party. I called the haunted house Scream in the Dark. Troy has a lot of my memories, a lot of my insecurities, and a lot of my ambitions, let's say. So I used Troy to get out a lot of my own inner demons, shall we say.
So it's kind of, in a way, it's therapeutic for you as well to work through things.
Yeah, well, very much, because I think this, the way the story came to be is a very therapeutic method that actually was a survival tool for me.
Well, let's talk about that. So now, where did this idea come to you? What were you doing? Were you like at a shopping mall, or were you out bowling?
So this book is the product of the end of an 8-year prison sentence. I am a recovering addict. I have almost 12 years clean and sober right now. That addiction landed me in the prison system, where I did 8 years. And towards the end of that, I was in a halfway house. I was in that halfway house in January of 2020, about to go out to college to finish getting my associate's degree. And I actually got out the door and started going to a couple classes, would come home to the halfway house late at night and do my homework. And about a month or two later, COVID hit. So the halfway house was put under lockdown. Insanity broke loose. Like, there was 277 guys in this halfway house. COVID had gotten in the building, and guys started dropping, like left and right. People were passing out in the hallways. The guards were coming in Tyvek suits, removing people by the day. And it was a volatile situation. And I was at that. A lot of crazy thoughts were filling my head. We didn't know if we were even going to survive, because they weren't telling us anything. They weren't allowing us to wear masks. They weren't allowing us to have hand sanitizer. Masks are considered concealing your identity. Hand sanitizer, they're worried the guys are going to drink it because it's got alcohol in it. So everybody got sick. I got sick. Not that bad. But I realized I had to do something, or I was going to lose my mind. And I had already been writing throughout the course of my sentence. And I sat down one night to write what I thought would be a short story. And I wrote the first line, which is now chapter 1 of the book that exists today. Within a couple hours, I had so much material. And there was certainly no end in sight as to where the story was going to go. And I realized right away this was going to be a much larger piece, nowhere near a short story. I continued to write this over the course of the next 6 months in the halfway house, writing from 6 p.m. at night to 11 p.m. every night, straight through, no breaks, never had writer's block, complete, came out in like a stream of consciousness. It came out like it was being delivered to me, like my fingers were just moving and the words were coming out. It was very, very surreal. during the day, I would take I was writing this on a little portable word processor called the Alpha Smart 3000. You can see 3 lines of text, and there's 8 files that you can fill up. Once they're filled up, you got to dump it out onto a computer and put it on a zip drive. So I would do that in the halfway house's library. They had one computer. They'd let me use it for an hour to dump it. So I'd write at night. During the day, I'd fill the zip drive and then plot out what would be my next 12 to 20 scenes. And this went on for 6 months. And towards the end of that 6 months, Halloween was actually coming up. And on October 31st of 2020, I typed the words, "The End," looked down at a file containing 520,000 words, and 6 days later, I was released from the halfway house and free to go home.
And that must have been quite a strange atmosphere, being in a cell, halfway house, but feeling like being in a cell because you're locked in. In essence, you're locked in that place. You can't go anywhere. And people around you are dying and getting sick and being taken out. Do you think that kind of adds to the darkness?
Yeah, well, there's a definite, especially in the first book, there's a biological aspect to this story as the contagion is spreading in Garrett Grove and people are getting sick and people are dying. That definitely influenced a lot of this book, and that pressure cooker of, we didn't know if we were even going to survive that last 6 months in the halfway house. So that completely influenced where I was at, and probably the urgency to get this story out was also influenced by that experience. Yeah.
Did you find it harder to work in or out of the halfway house? Did you find it more distracting in the house itself, or was it harder to work once you left that environment?
Believe it or not, in the halfway house, it was easy. So I was in a room with 12 different guys locked in, 12 by 12 room. We're on top of each other. They're playing dice. They're screaming. They're blasting rap music. And I just put my headphones on. I turned up the music and I wrote. And it's just, like, I blocked out the world and I just wrote this story. Then I got home and wow, I'm back in the world after being away for a long time. So everything is new. I've got social anxiety. The world shut down still because we're on COVID lockdown. I put the story to the side for a little bit and then came back to it and started looking at all that I had to work with. And there was a lot of redrafting to do. And that's where it got hard. Now, looking at this in the quiet of my own bedroom, no one around, no loud noises, I don't know. It was different. And that was way harder than actually the first draft. Also because maybe the first draft, you're just trying to get it out of you. When we're trying to refine it, we're trying to make it presentable. It would be a long time before I felt this book was.
Yeah, strange. It would be different for me. I couldn't work in a room with 12 men on top of each other.
Well, I've heard differently about it.
It's all rumors. None of it's true. Okay. Don't believe what you read on the internet. Okay.
I won't.
I put a lot of stuff out there, but no, a lot of it's not true. Well, so how did you decide what you're going to cut then? You got so much work and it's this huge amount of words. How did you decide what you're going to keep in and what you're going to cut? Because as you were writing it was probably all important to you.
Well, it is all important. And fortunately, I do have saved files, and I even have a saved printed first draft of this book in its entirety. But of course, the first things that get axed are repetitive sentences. Anywhere you've gone and, that Alpha Smart, I could only see 3 lines of script at a time. So there's no editing as you go. This is just write it, get it out, move on. So naturally, I was repetitive at times. And sometimes I went off on tangents. Just wherever the mind went is where my writing went. So I had to pick and choose there. But not always was I the best judge of what should be chopped out. I I brought a developmental editor into it. I brought a content editor, copy editor into it. I used alpha readers. I used ARC readers. I used beta readers after all of them, and then I even used proofreaders to see what was superfluous, what needed to be refined, and where I was lacking in showing versus telling, because I didn't want to tell the story. I wanted you to feel every goose flesh, every pinprick, every moment of tension.
I'm just curious. Do you miss the Alpha Smart? And I'm just assuming you're not using it anymore, but I figure that would give you a lot of focus.
I have it still, and I've tried to sit down and use it. It's clunky. The keys stick. And I mean, honestly, prior to when I was using it, I did not have tons and tons of work as a writer working on a laptop, so I hadn't had the fluidity that I do now working on a comfortable laptop.
Hard to go back.
Yeah, it's hard to go back. It would be like going back to a manual typewriter or an electric typewriter at this point, trying to do that, which I remember my mother sitting with the regular portable typewriter typing away her columns for the paper, and how did you get anything done back then? It's so impossible. Yeah. So I have it. It's nostalgic. It's mentioned in my foreword of the book, but I don't have. I'm not tied to going back to the horse and chariot at this point.
Right. Plus, you need all those men around you in the room.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It comes with the package.
Right. You can't have one without the other.
Troy Fischer. Who is he? Let's talk about your main character and how much of he is from you.
Yeah. Well, like I said, Troy has got so much of me in him, and Troy is that 10-year-old boy who's experiencing Halloween with the stars in his eyes, and he's a creative. He wants to be a set designer or maybe even a movie producer when he gets older. He's building haunted houses. He's interested in the new girl at school, and he's full of excitement and wonder. And I've never lost that excitement and wonder. I've never lost connection to who I was as a kid, because first of all, I refuse to get old. I refuse to grow, more I should say, I refuse to grow up. I'm making TikToks every day. I'm a big kid at heart, and Troy experiences a lot of the things I experienced, and I was able to write down some of my childhood memories, bring them out onto the paper, and have him experience them, and I was able to relive them again. Some things came out in this story that I haven't thought about in years. This helped me deal with a lot. This helped me deal with some of my insecurities, some of my fears, hopes, definitely my aspirations. And Troy, I'm not Troy, but Troy has a lot of me in him.
Did you plan a subtext? Do you plan a meaning? Is there something you wanted the reader to get out of this, or was this just purely entertainment?
There's a lot, actually. There's many through lines through this, and there's a couple messages too. And something, Troy's father, who's, he's a bit confused. He's a bit of an absentee father who his life hasn't turned out the way it is. And he's constantly reminded that despite what plans you have for your own life, God or the universe's plans will always come as a surprise. And that's a message that comes through. There's also, well, I don't want to give it away, but there's a tie into good versus evil. There's spirituality in this book, and there's a lot of history too. We learn about other civilizations that have been mysteriously wiped off the face of the earth, and give a little insight to that. We learn about the Lenni Lenape tribe that inhabited the area prior to the settlers of the Watchung Mountain range. We also get to experience through the coroner and through the sheriff's eyes PTSD. Carl Primrose, the sheriff, is a Vietnam veteran, and I was able to talk with a couple of vets and get some inspiration and some backstory of what it was like to live through that time, live through war, and their different takes on what it was like to come home from that period. Bert, the coroner, is a veteran of World War II, so we have some backstory on that. So there's a little bit of rich history in this. There's a little bit of diverse subgenres, and I think there's something for everybody in this book.
Did you research out some of the history and all that in the area? Was that like after you got out of the halfway house, or did you already know it?
I'd known a lot. Like I said, at that time, I was fresh going through my associates in liberal arts, so I was taking history. I was learning a lot about things. Also, I grew up in an area that was founded by the Lenni Lenape Indians tribe, the Indian tribe there. So the Native Americans in our area, we learned a lot about them growing up, and I've always been fascinated by the way they were in touch with the world on so much of a more spiritual and holistic level than something that we've grown so far from, which, there's something to be said about being in tune with the world in which you live.
Right, and the men farting in your room. I mean, that's important. You got to be in tune with that. It'll be silent but deadly.
Yeah.
And Garrett Grove, so maybe explain the location, the setting, the town. Where did that come from, and what inspired that?
My own town is the inspiration for Garrett Grove. Garrett Grove, I moved to upstate New York just for purposes to make it a little more isolated. But Garrett Grove is an isolated mountain town set in the Watchung Mountain range. It's at the foot of Garrett Mountain, and towards the north end there is a raging river called the Lenape River, and at the southern end of town is a just slightly smaller than one of the Great Lakes called King Lake, inspired completely from where I live, the town I grew up in. Many of the landmarks that you'll find in Garrett Grove are a page right out of my hometown. Anyone who I went to school with or reading it, who comes from Pompton Plains, New Jersey, will recognize so much of the street names and the landmarks. So yeah, it's right. I moved it to New York for various reasons and figured we could make it even that much scarier. Set it in 1979, move it into the thick woods of upstate New York. And
Did you use a lot of people that you knew then back in that town when you were a young lad? Do you have a lot of characters in there, sub-characters that you've taken from your life?
There's people who have inspired the characters for sure, definitely, who have influenced it. Not verbatim or anything like that, but maybe well, you know what? Troy is infatuated with the new girl who I also was infatuated with the new girl, and I'm actually still with the new girl. So she's made it into the book. Her name is Wendy. She's in the book. Okay.
Well, we have her on the line right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's
yeah. And there's others. Yeah, it's definitely got rich in influence, and I hope I pay tribute to anyone who may read it who feels like, that kind of sounds like me. And if I didn't like you, well, you
end up dead.
You ended up dead pretty quick.
And you were one of the ones that suffered.
Yeah.
Well, so are you careful with how much you do that and how much you bring violence and gore into it then? Or do you just do what you need to do? Or are you thinking about the reader when you portray evil things. How's that?
The reader, like as I'm writing the book, as the reader in my mind, I'm always imagining that somebody who's reading this, but at the end of the day, I wrote this book for me. I wrote the book that I wanted to always write, and I wrote the book that I wanted to read myself. I love that genre. I love that time period. And when it's time to deliver the violence, I'll deliver it regardless of who may be reading this book. And if somebody has a problem with it, I apologize. But that's as far as it goes.
Yeah, you'll get violent with them.
Yeah.
You kill them in the next book. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I hope people enjoy it. I don't think, it does take place in 1979, and things were different then. It's just, but I didn't go out of my way for any of the characters to be overtly, unless I really wanted you to dislike the character. But it's a timepiece, and it's a look into what life was like in 1979, and it's a look into not only the innocence of childhood, it's also a look at some of the jaded views of adulthood, and also some of the insecurities and dreams of adults as well.
How do you think this has changed you writing this series?
It was something that I needed to do. I've grown writing this, not only as a person, but also as a writer. I've learned so much writing this, and some of the editors I worked with really helped me develop my skills as a writer. But, coming out of the halfway house, going through all that, writing this under the pressure cooker of COVID lockdown in a halfway house towards the end of a rather oppressive prison sentence, that's all shaped somebody who was not that person before they went in. So this book has been a chrysalis of sort, a cocoon. It allowed me to grow, and it allowed me to get a lot of emotions and thoughts out on paper that I probably wouldn't have had I not been able to write it.
Now, it's quite a bit. Now, you're going to put all 4 books up between now and, I guess, the Halloween time period and stuff. What was your thought behind doing that?
So when I wrote the book, I just wrote it. It's one gigantic story, and now in all its entirety, it's 1,200 pages. There was no way I could deliver a book that size and expect anyone to read it. Readers today do not buy books that large and probably would run from it. Now I'm looking at it, I'm like, how am I going to deliver this story and share it with the world? And the natural course was to break it into parts. And 4 seemed like the magic number, although a couple of the books are still a bit thick. So I found some nice breaking points in between. I found the good cliffhangers for stopping points to leave off on. But I didn't want to lose the reader. I wanted to deliver the book as fast as possible, try to gain momentum with the reader and maybe with whatever algorithms work in the digital world. So I figured, let's go like 3 to 4 weeks in between each book. So the first one came out July 16th. Second one comes out on August 3rd. August 6th. September 3rd is the 3rd book, and October 1st is the 4th book. So it's bang, bang, bang. It's much like the book itself. Like the book itself is the 1 week leading up to Halloween. We've started in July, and we're leading up to Halloween, and we're taking the hell train all the way to Halloween.
Well, with such a long work, how did you handle the continuity? Did you just take good notes? Did you have any tools or any systems that you put into play to make sure that everything, whether it was eye color or vehicles or whatever, remained the same throughout the work?
So I did take copious notes as I was doing this. I have an entire character list of the hundreds of characters, how they're related to each other, how they have intersectionality. I drew maps of the town. I also have the subplot of what scene comes what. I have the thousands of scenes listed on paper. But, then you get into the redrafting, and there's the continuity thing that still needs to be addressed. And you're finding, I said I dropped him off here, and how can he be over here? That's kind of where the redrafting, the refining, and the editors, proofreaders, arc readers, alpha readers, well, that's where they all came into play to call me on when something was unclear or when I was going astray. And I had really great people working for me who really paid close attention to this. And yeah, I couldn't have done it without them. A huge team, really. I mean, when they say it takes a village, it did. This would not have gotten off the ground if I didn't have so many people working on this.
Well, and you're welcome. Not a problem.
And thank you so much. Everyone, yeah.
And dialogue, scenes. How do you write that? Do you act them out, or do you see it in your head? What's your way of doing dialogues and scenes?
So, as I was writing this book, this is one of those few times where I was writing and I actually saw it playing out. Like, from the first scene on, I saw this as if I was watching a movie. I can visually see each scene. I could see each character talking. I can even hear the tone of their voice. So I knew how they would talk, who would have an accent, who would be a little, maybe a little slower in their speech delivery. And so I heard that in my head as I was writing it. So it helped me give each character a different flair, a different way of delivery. I don't know, if all authors see their story as they're writing it as if it's being on the screen before them. But for this one I did. I don't always see it like that. But this one I could clearly see it. And then when I want to make sure that I'm doing it to the best of my ability, I act it out myself and I try to deliver the dialogue as I'm proofreading it, see what's hokey, what doesn't work. I wanted to make sure every line flowed as if we were on a fluid ride, like we were taking a trip on a carousel or a roller coaster. And when we built up speed, I wanted to make sure that was delivered in the sentence. And then when it was climbing that mountain, before we hit the first drop, I wanted to make sure that it was building that slow rise of tension. And that just came with redrafting and rereading and re-editing.
So you dress up and then you start pretending you're in that role, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I could see that, And so you're actually hearing your characters too. Do you normally hear your characters every time you do write?
My first novelette is called Abigail, which is about a gay man living in Florida who finds a baby on his front porch, and it's a demon baby. But Adrian sees this baby. He's like, "This is the most beautiful baby I've ever seen. I'm going to take care of her." And I heard Adrian. Abigail's a little baby, so I kind of heard her. But I heard the characters in the story Abigail, and that was one. And then again, a lot of them in between, I did not really hear them. But I heard them in my trip into Garrett Grove, and I heard Troy, and I heard Lois Fisher, and Carl Primrose, and pretty much everybody in this book. I hear them, and I still hear them. And the narrator, who, J.P. Adams, just did the audiobook for it, and he did such a great job. He really captured a lot of the voices that I was expecting to hear.
How do you think that makes your writing different then? Like or does it? Like when you hear characters and you're kind of going through this experience, like you're doing with this book, and let's say a story that you don't, is there a different outcome?
Yeah, well, I think this is far more three-dimensional. Most of the characters are pretty rich, definitely having a lot of interior thoughts and finding out about them. There's backstory in this. Everybody's got something, that we learn, whether it's just a line or two to, maybe a small part of a chapter. We learn about everybody that we meet, and having those fleshed out characters, knowing how they speak, how they act, their insecurities, their aspirations really help me, I think, deliver a story that the reader identifies.
Does it make you feel a little bit vulnerable writing a lot of this stuff that comes from your own life?
Yeah, well, I'm truth be told, I'm a big softie. I'm vulnerable on a daily basis. I care what everybody thinks, and at the end of the day, we just want people to like what we do. We want them to like us. We want them to like our art, and I'm an open book. I hope people like it. I get every 1-star review I ever got eats at me. You know, I take everything personally, and the 5 stars or the 4s and 3, I glow and I love it. But yeah, you know, I am always going to be a thin-skinned author. I'm never going to be jaded and you know, it's not water off a duck's back. I take everything to heart.
Well, we have to go after those 1 stars.
Yeah.
Hunt them down, take them out. Come on.
Yeah, we're all going to get them. You know, you can't please everybody.
No, it's impossible, you know. Okay, let's talk about contact and how people find the one and only Daemon.
All right. So, hey, if you want to check out the books, there's a few ways. They are all available on Amazon, and all 4 books in the series are available for pre-order. Book 1 is out now. Also at barnesandnoble.com, the Ojanox. Just type that in. All 4 books are going to pop up in paperback and hardcover. On Amazon, we've also got the Kindle, and we've got the audio book up. All books are going to have the audio. I've got a couple websites, thedaemonmanx.com. Going to tell you about my appearances in the area. It's going to show you my books, tell you a little bit about them. It'll link you to my publishing website where you can purchase signed copies of the Ojanox series, which is lastwaltzpublishing.com. Last as in final, waltz as in the dance, Last Waltz Publishing. And I'm on all social medias. I'm doing a little TikTok these days. I'm kind of semi-viral over there, talking about my passion for music, my passion for horror writing. I have a couple followers over there, and we have a really good time. I'm also doing live events there, and I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and, you know, wherever. I'm on the street washing windshields, whatever.
OnlyFans? You got the OnlyFans page up yet? Or
Not yet, but you know, we're working on it. After my pedicure on Friday, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Of course, we'll have all of that up on our website too, so people can find you easily. And
Thank you so much.
We appreciate you being here, and I wish you the best and luck here. And Mr. Daemon Manx, thank you.
Thank you, guys. It was great as always.
Thanks, Daemon.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.